everybody, this is Carl. I am back with a new movie spoiler review, and this time we're covering DC's new film, The Flash. Not that Flash. Yeah. So before we get right into it, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, follow me on links in the description below, like my YouTube channel. Next month I will be doing like a Hot Ones challenge video, so send in your questions if you have any for me, so that way I'll answer them as I try out each of the hot sauces. And let's just get right into it, man. I've been holding on to this for at least a couple of days now, because like, man, people been asking me like, oh, what you think of like The Flash? They send me questions, and it's like what'd you think of The Flash and everything. So like, I didn't want to spoil anything for them, but I just let people know, like, if I give it like any kind of rating, I give it like an 8.5 personally. I think it's like a very good movie. Now, I want to be completely upfront with you guys. Now, of course, this is based off the Flashpoint storyline, and they made a few changes here and there, but it's pretty much the gist of it. Now, I have not been a fan of the Flashpoint storyline because I generally do not like dark timeline stories. That's why I usually don't care for the Marvel's What If stories. Now, I am that being said, I mean, like, there's some, like, most DC Elseworld stories I do really care for. I've done quite a few up on my YouTube channel, by the way, so you can check them out, like my Batman Noel comic review and Batman Damned, and I think I cover like Batman: A Serious House on Serious Earth. This is one of my earliest comic book reviews. But generally I don't care for, like, bleak storylines, and it's not my vibe. Not that it's not like I don't care for dark tones, but when it's like, in so cynical in some kind of fashion, generally I don't care for it. But I still can respect, especially if something like Flashpoint, even though it's usually not my cup of tea, I respect it because it's still a pretty solid story. I even saw the animated Flashpoint movie. Like I said, like, I generally don't care for it, but I respect the narrative. But I think, like, in the comics, at least like a year or so ago, they really kind of hammered that to the freaking ground, trying to revitalize make the Flashpoint universe a real universe that you can actually travel to, even though that world is supposed to be completely annihilated because it's supposed to be doomed to die. Here it's almost like in the same way. It's like Barry's like changing the timeline, leaving like a different parallel timeline where it's gonna be doomed to die. Anyway, of course, this is directed by Andy Machete, who also has been on record saying, like, if he gets like a second chance to make another Flash movie, he wants to keep Ezra Miller. And let's just nip it in the bud right here and now about Ezra Miller's, issues that fairly recently they've been getting rehab and all the other stuff, and many people I've been talking to, and a lot of people bring up about how, like, oh, hey, maybe we should because Jonathan Major's situation, and people was wondering, like, okay, like, you're giving so much grace with Ezra Miller, and Jonathan Majors still, even though I think Jonathan Majors gonna end on a better note than Ezra Miller in a way, because there's concrete proof that Ezra Miller did what they did, while Jonathan Majors is a little iffy, but there's more stuff coming out, at least the way I see it, is what, the information is coming to the public. It seems, in my opinion, give him some saving grace, because this woman, kind of wild out trying to snatch a phone, and like he's trying to keep her from snatching his phone, and like, oh, he brushed up against me, or he's trying to keep him from taking his phone. Like, just because it's some physical contact, is deemed abuse. Like, I don't want to go on a diatribe on that, but I'm just saying, like, not that she's incredible, and not like, a woman should not be listened to, but it should not be equally not as immediately believed. They should let the evidence play out as they need to play out in the process that it needs to play out. And as the way it stands, in my opinion, at this point in time, Jonathan Majors, luckily, Disney, throwing him out as Kang, unlike other commercials and other projects are so readily to do. But anyway, hopefully, everything goes up well with Jonathan Majors. But Ezra Miller has been going through rehab and doing what he needed to do to get themselves right. And even with, like, the red carpet they were on, and, certain interviews has to be like, nitpicky about what they have to ask, because we trying to make, understandably, the studio's trying to make sure, like, okay, we already know about the elephant in the room, let's try not to let it ruin this red carpet moment when it's supposed to be like a good thing right now. Let's try to get through this. So it's understandable. So hopefully Ezra Miller can get themselves, right, get the help that they need, and settle things with the law as neatly as possible. So, yeah, I started to address that. So Ezra Miller playing Barry Allen, the Flash, got Sasha Cale as Supergirl. Even though, like, yeah, she played a pretty dope Supergirl. It just, I grew up on a Supergirl that was blonde, and it's like, I don't know, maybe it's like, it's just my nostalgia berries, getting in the way. But it doesn't negate the fact that she did an incredible job. We got Michael Shannon reprising his role as General Zod, Ron Livingston as Henry Allen, the father, Maribel Verdú as Nora Allen. I was surprised there was no thing with Flash and Mr. Freeze in comics where both have, like, relatives that are named after each other, like his wife and Barry's mom. Like, why did you say that name? It's right there. Kiersey Clemens as Iris West, who's our second time playing as the character. We only saw her in, like, both versions of the Justice League films. Yeah, of course, Michael Keaton reprising his role as both him and Ben Affleck reprising their roles as different variants of Batman. So Barry is like, it's like at least a day away from a chance for his father to get parole, because there was no evidence to suggest that he has nothing to do with his wife's murder. And of course, if you're a Flash fan, you know the story about, the death of Barry's mom. And of course, in the comics, and in the Flashpoint comic especially, it was the Reverse Flash who, the main arch enemy of the Flash, or most of the Flashes, is responsible for killing Barry's mom. And one of the problems I have with this movie is that the fact that you kind of neglected the fact that to bring up who was the one responsible for killing the mom. You having at least brought that in, or at least teased it with like red lightning or something. At least some kind of specks of red lightning emanating, you know, in the house somewhere. It's like leaving like a subtle clue that, oh, next Flash movie we might be dealing with Reverse Flash. And especially you can make like a decent amount of Flash movies with a lot of the Rogues Gallery, like, you know, make some kind of like a heist movie with the Rogues, like with Captain Cold leading, or something with like in the Justice League movie that, you know, Barry Allen mentions about, like, you know, I know Gorilla Sign Language, hinting to Gorilla Grodd. And of course, Reverse Flash. So it's like a fair amount of, and of course, all these evil speedsters. So there's a fair amount of movies you can do with a lot of these Flash rogues. But anyway, Barry is like, you know, Day Away was father being like potentially paroled, but it's not looking good, and it's bringing up old feelings, tragic, you know, personal feelings that usually Flash is pretty, like, you know, hopeful, happy, and everything like that. But when it comes to this kind of thing, this really brings him down in the dumps. And so he's like on his way. He's trying to make it to work, but he's, you know, getting and he's trying to get his special, you know, particular order that this one barista handles, but she's not at work this day. Some other dude who just kept on yapping and not making his doggone meal. So then Jimmy Irons' Alfred calls Barry. It's like, oh, there's a problem in Gotham. Superman, Cyborg, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, they all are busy, and Batman is chasing down these bad guys holding these dangerous chemicals, and we contacted Wonder Woman, but she's busy. She's going to be on her way, but you can get there faster. And there's a building's about to collapse, this hospital. So Barry, in the time that this guy is talking and making this breakfast thing, Barry runs to Gotham City from Central City, and I like the use of Barry's speed powers in this, where you can see from his point of view, or at least two instances of using his powers through his point of view. Like, things not only just slow down, but it's like hyper time, where he just like, he can just run like, you know, you typically would see a person run, but everything seems slow down as he's just like a bullet and just barreling down. And it's like, I like that. It's like, it's very dope. It's like, of course, he had the movie budget, but it's definitely like better than what we've seen from the Flash TV show. But even still, it's still pretty dope. Speaking of which, when I'm on the subject, if you've seen like the Flash TV show, or even this DC CW TV shows in general, there was this big crisis moment where all these different various DC properties that we've seen from other films and TV shows, not films, but TV shows, all converging. But then it's like, it was a surprise where it's like, you know, Ezra Miller Flash bumps into Grant Gustin Flash, and they meet each other, shaking their hands. It's like, oh, I like your suit. I like your suit too. It's like that kind of moment. And it's like, it's like a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes before, you know, they go their separate ways. But it's like, God, it's like, you can't recreate that. You know, because I'm not sure Grant Gustin how he feels about what's going on with Ezra Miller. He doesn't want to probably be associated with all that. But you can at least take that clip and input it into the film so that way it can have some correlation. Unfortunately, they didn't do that, and I kind of felt bummed about that, because that was still a big deal. Because, like, how often do you see, like, a TV show and a movie collab so fluently like that? Because they generally don't do it. This is probably like the first time, especially in DC CW history, that they actually bring in something from the movie properties, any of the movie properties, and bring it in to a TV show. I'll be just like a moment, but still, it was a huge deal. So unfortunately, they didn't like input that. Of course, there's been a lot of edits and reshoots, which is another problem a lot of people are having with this film. They still widely enjoyed it, but it's kind of glaring, especially the CGI. I want to bring up the CGI right here now. That's another issue that I agree that very PS2 vibes here. There are moments where it's utilized very well regardless, especially when you see Barry's, you know, rolling back time. It could have done better. I don't hate it, but there's a moment where, like, you know, Barry's, you know, of course, it's addressing the fact that because, you know, all flashes burn so much calories than a normal person, they have to eat more calories than anybody else in order to sustain their power. So you see he put some kind of like a meter thing on his wrist, on his costume wrist, and he sees like he's kind of low on fuel, so he breaks into like a vending machine and eats up all the snacks he can, while side of the building is collapsing of this hospital, where it's like who puts like a maternity ward on the side of a building with glass and everything like that, instead of being somewhere a more secured space in the middle of the hospital. But whatever. But you see like time slowing down, and of course the CGI dog, babies, and the nurse falling down doesn't look good. Yeah, I'm not even gonna lie, because yeah, it's rough. But that's probably the worst part of, you know, of the film, to be honest. So you can get that out the way so we can get to the cool stuff. So he saves all those people and the babies and everything like that. And Barry meets up with Iris, and they have this kind of you know, talk, because he's a journalist and everything like that. And she's like, you know, so he's, you know, getting on the phone with his father, and I'm jumping around the place, but he has a phone call with his father because he's getting help with Bruce and Wayne Tag to try to like decrypt this camera footage, you know, back in the day of where his father's at the store. He's supposed to get his can of tomatoes, but people suspect he was the one responsible for killing his own wife. And this because the cans is on like the bottom shelf, so he never looked up, so they didn't have a concrete proof that, you know, it's him with, you know, he says what he claims, even though, you know, when they arrested him, he was wearing the same clothes that you could see in the footage, so you could at least give some doubt. But he's him and his father's like reminiscing about the good times, and he wants Barry to try to just live his life, and, you know, just, you know, don't waste time trying to worry about him. It's kind of almost the same spiel you got from like the Justice League film. He goes running to his old house, and then kind of like in like the comic and an animated film, how like he's just letting it sink in, and he's like overwhelmed the fact that he lost somebody like he looked up to, and another person he also equally looked up to is getting blamed for it, and is distraught. And like he was like, what, like 8 or 10 years old, and witnessing like his mom in the kitchen bleeding to death. It's like, it's hard on, like, you know, any kid. So he's like, unlike in the comics where he doesn't know he's doing this, but he's constantly aware in this iteration where he's just running. He just needs to run. And he accidentally, you know, went into the past several hours earlier to the moment where he's about to rescue these babies. And he goes right back to the present, and he talks with Bruce about like, oh my God, like you know, I have the ability to, like, do this, so I can save my mom and my dad in the process. And Bruce had to explain to him, like, yeah, you could, but you can also disrupt the flow of time altogether. Like, there's a butterfly effect. Like, you step on a blade of grass, it can, you will unknowingly cause some level of damage in the future or present, without you probably even meaning to. So it's not a good idea. Leave things alone, which it's always been addressed when it comes to the Flash, in the early parts of his superhero career, when he first discovered he can time travel. Of course, after talking with Iris, he then has an epiphany where it's like, well, if I don't interact with anybody, I gotta be very, very, very careful and about the things I'm affecting. I just want to just do this one thing, just move this can to her shopping cart so she wouldn't forget it, so there'd be no reason for his father to leave the house to prevent anybody from breaking in. Even though, I know it's a freaking Reverse Flash, but like I said, that should have been addressed, at least in some capacity. We know who it is. It's not like, because the same thing with like Bruce's killer. For the longest time, we didn't know who that mysterious guy was until I don't know when. Eventually, we figured out the name was Joe Chill. And eventually we figured out who, I can't remember off the top of my head now, but the mugger who killed Uncle Ben, we eventually figured out the guy's name. So if we don't need this whole preamble about this mystery thug who committed this crime. But so Barry, using this chronosphere that's wrapped around him as he's going through the Speed Force, rewound time all the way back to the date where he goes to the supermarket as his mother is shopping. He takes this can of tomatoes and places it in the shopping cart and then speeds off. But while he's trying to go back to the present, he gets intercepted by this shadowy figure, which I initially thought was like maybe like the Black Racer, or like the speedster's god, the speedster's version of the God of Death, because there's like a regular God of Death in a DC universe, but then there's one for speedsters more specifically, because since their level of power needs something on that same level of power to be able to catch up to them to reap them. So he is stopped short on the on a timeline where he's 18 years old. So he sees his parents, they living happily in the house. Then he realizes his younger self is about to, his 18-year-old self is about to walk in the house, and he, runs out of the house and then tackles him to the ground, and they they had a conversation. And of course, this is part, everybody agrees, this is like the best. Usually there's movies where it's like people are, the same person, like typically twins when the actor is not a twin, or they try to show some wonky effect of having, kind of like the way like Lindsay Lohan's film back in the day, Parent Trap. I think that looked pretty decent as well. But how talking about when it's like two the same person's trying to occupy the same space. It's done very well here. And of course, 18-year-old Barry is kind of obnoxious, and of course, I'm glad he addresses later in the film. It's like, it's like, yeah, he's a young kid. And he's kind of, and of course, Barry's, a little bit not like hard edge or anything like that, but he's definitely more mature. But because of his experiences during the basic timeline, where he has to push himself in order to be a forensic, scientist and everything like that, so he can try to get his father out of prison, everything like that. It gives him a different perspective. Here, this Barry B didn't have any of that trauma, so he lived a normal life, and he's more easygoing. He's more like a slacker kind of dude, and he ain't trying to become a forensic scientist. So he's living like a different type of life. So he realizes, like, oh, this is the day I would have typically got my powers. And because you're not gonna be going to this field, then that accident won't affect you. So if I end up going back to my timeline, I won't have my powers no more. I still have it now. So I need to get you to the spot where you need to be so I can still have my powers in the future. So they sneak into the police precinct, into the lab, and you get to see like the phasing thing, how it works. Hold on a second, guys, because I gotta get because it's like a Grubhub order is on its way. So we're in like a few minutes. Sorry about this. This is so unprofessional. And like I don't have like the editing tools. I don't know all that kind of thing. So you're gonna have to see. There's like a be right back moment here. So this is gonna be like a brief intermission. So it should not take too long. So I will see you in just like a couple of minutes. I'll be back in a flash. Okay, I'm back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Took a little longer because the driver, forgot to get my drink out of her car. So you got to walk her butt back to get it. It's like, oh my God. Sorry about that. Anyway, where was I? So he went back in time, got to the precinct so he can make sure, because at first, like, young Barry is hyped, like, oh, I got superpowers, so I can't wait. But then realize the process of how he got his superpowers, like, oh, no, never mind, not with it, because I don't want to get struck by lightning. And it's like, Barry A was like, you won't technically be hit by lightning. It's the chemicals is pretty much gonna, like, hitting you, but it's like, no, technically he's gonna get hit by lightning. So I don't know why you're trying to sugarcoat it. But while these two are bickering, the lightning comes in, hits the chemicals, it went through Barry A and channeled into Barry B. And in the process, like, Barry A's tooth falls out and it lands in his, Barry B's mouth. It was so gross. But in that process, because, like, the thing, baby, because the speed powers were transferred to Barry B. So in that regard, now that Barry A can't use the Speed Force anymore. So he has to teach Barry B how to use super speed now. And how, like, and this is technically, you can call it like a pseudo origin story. So that way we get to learn, along with Barry B, how Barry A learned how to use his super speed, phasing through stuff, and, like, be careful not to burn off your clothes because of the friction. And then, of course, like, you need to consume a lot of calories because you're going to be burning through all that too. And of course, there's the sleepiness. You probably, if you're not careful, you end up passing out unexpectedly. So all that was pretty dope. So the next day, there's a broadcast with General Zod, and Barry A realized, oh my God, this is the day where Zod makes his announcement about, like, oh my God, like, we know you hiding a Kryptonian on this planet. And then we get a nice little moment with Barry A realizing, because we never know what he was doing during this event of Man of Steel, because this is like, just like a day after he got his powers, and of course he doesn't have a suit. He kind of jimmied up some half-baked kind of costume, and he races to Metropolis to try to save somebody. But of course, as we learned from the Justice League film, that he doesn't have the kind of battle prowess as the others do. When it comes to fight or flight reflex, he usually flight. And he sees, like, one of those world engine things, take things up and plummets it to the ground, terraforming the area. And then he sees this, like, kid, want to go after his father, but realizing, like, his father's pinned down, and he wants to save both, but he has to save the kid. And it's like, it's too late for the dad, so he had to run. And so it's like, it's one of the Barry's one of his, like, this first tragedy. Well, like, originally his first tragedy was his mom, but that's probably like his second biggest tragedy, at least in terms of superhero career. That was his first, like, kind of loss. He couldn't save this, and you know how this probably touches, is a sore subject for him. It's like, I couldn't save this kid's father, and it's like, that's like an added scar to him. Uh, so now that he has the benefit of knowledge of what Zod's after, he's going to try to assemble the Justice League early. He's trying to look up online. Okay, where is like Diana? Oh, she's she's not a thing here. I guess because like I guess the effects. Of course, we see a little bit of Ben Affleck, not only Ben Affleck Batman, but like Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman. She, just like in like the Shazam 2, where she just shows up, plays that awesome guitar riff and everything like that, which is always good to hear. But she's only there for a moment before she flies away, and it's like, it's unfortunate that Gal Gadot won't be returning as Wonder Woman anymore. This sucks. Along with Henry Cavill, I don't want to keep recasting this, but it's so messed up. Like, why DC, why Warner Bros. Don't want to keep Henry Cavill? Like, and like Gal Gadot's like, why? And it's like, and James Gunn, like, I want to say James Gunn's not fighting for it, but it's like, come on, it's like clearly you're cherry picking who you want to keep, and like clearly you're keeping like your Suicide Squad and Peacemakers that you've worked on, like like, so there's no reason why you couldn't just let Sleeping Dogs lie with like the others and let them stay. I don't want to get into all that, but like I already aired my grievances on multiple like videos, but so she won't be returning as Wonder Woman anymore for future James Gunn DC properties, which is a shame because he was awesome. But then Barry's looking up online, and he's like, Vic. Of course, we already know about like Ray Fisher and his issues with Warner Bros. After the whole Joss Whedon situation and that catastrophe that was. So it's understandable he doesn't want to associate with DC anymore. But we get like a news clipping that Vic Stone never had that kind of accident. So. At least I can't remember that newspaper clipping, but it's like it never went to that accident that caused him to his father to make him to a cyborg. Aquaman was never born. His father, we got a little thing with I keep forgetting his name, but Boba Fett. He never met up with Aquaman's mom. And he ends up marrying some other woman who's like, kind of like a little joke, like a woman who just pretty much let herself go kind of situation. Which is funny, but it's like, it could have like you could have just went with just a different woman altogether. We all know who Aquaman's mom looked like. You could have just went with a generic, just average woman. Doesn't need to be a supermodel, and definitely doesn't need to be some obese woman just laying on a couch. You could just have like a respectable. It would have been funny if you could have just had Ming-Na Wen be his wife in this alternate timeline. It kind of play at the situation with like the Boba Fett show, because him and Ming-Na Wen's like partners in crime. They could have just had that little joke. That would have been very funny. If you want to add some laughs, that would have been a very funny. Just have like Ming-Na Wen show up as like his wife for like a brief cameo. It's like, oh, that's my wife. It's like, what are you talking about? That's my wife. Like, I don't. It's like you just see like, no, I don't think so. So he never met Aquaman's mom. Never met his father, so he doesn't exist. And so he's needs to find Clark, and of course, like, it should have been more. He knows he's looking up later on about like any kind of satellite or aircraft or something like that fell in Kansas in 30, 40 years ago. And so he knows it's somewhere in Kansas. So it's like, can just like speed run to the camp farm and try to figure out what's the what. Because clearly, if you know he's Kansas, you probably know about his parentage. But he's like, okay, we gotta find Batman. it's like Batman still exists, right? Like, you know, Barry's little slacker friends like, yeah, Barry, you know, Batman exists. And this is run, you know, at the same moment where uh Barry realizes the ramifications of what he did when it comes to messing around with time. You know, bringing up like certain movies like Back to the Future, because if you watch, you know, Back to the Future, you probably know the history that Marty McFly is being played by Michael J. Fox, but he only got casted because back in the 80s, Eric Stoltz was originally was sought after, but something happened where he couldn't do it, so he went with Michael J. Fox. Here, Eric Stoltz actually went with it, and he was Martin McFly there. And like there's other movies where like other actors played different roles that they didn't really originally play in. So both Barrys went to Wayne Manor, and they find Bruce Wayne, Michael Keaton, and I love this scene where Michael Keaton, and it's like, of course, this movie's not the first one that's going over about like multiverses and time travel. It's like Loki TV shows done it, the Spider-Verse did it already. But I love each one of them. I love their way of explaining about multiverse and timelines. In the same way with like Avengers Endgame. But I love their interpretation of multiverse and timeline here, where it's like, you know, it's like a plate of spaghetti. It's like it starts from one strand when it goes into one linear path, but as soon as you change anything, then it gets all noodled up. You just some stuff intersect, which leads Barry later on to mention about there's always this one particular constant. It's kind of like the same way as Across the Spider-Verse explained about like canon events. That's, you know, things can change willy-nilly depending on how the timelines work. But no matter what kind of multiverse or time travel cockamamie thing, there's always canon events. It's always remain like it has to remain true to make it, you know, like a foundation to branch off from. Every Bruce Wayne has to have an Alfred. Every Spider-Man has to lose a personal loved one, like typically like Uncle Ben. As I was going with my review of Across the Spider-Verse, which I did literally only like a week or two ago, where this could really echo throughout any kind of superheroes. Whereas like Superman always has to have the Doom Planet. Batman always gotta lose his parents. Those are canon events that cannot change. And which later on in the film, Barry comes to learn the hard way about like there are some things, because that's the lesson he has to learn, that his mom, you know, when he was a little kid was trying to teach him as he's trying to learn like a math problem. It's like sometimes there are answers. You know, sometimes there's no answers to problems. You gotta sometimes you gotta live with terrible outcomes. Barry asks for like, you know, Bruce's help, but Bruce is like, you know, I'm retired now. Like, you know, I cleaned up Gotham City. Is the most prosperous, peaceful place has it ever been, and so it, you know, the world doesn't need a Batman no more. And so the both Barry sneak into the Batcave, and of course you get to see like a cool shots of the Batmobile, 89 Batmobile, and the Bat plane and everything like that, which you never get to see like the Batmobile actually drive, which is kind of like a bummer. It's just like, look at this, the Batmobile, and that's some people's complaint, whereas like some things are just like you have it there just to be seen, but not capitalize off of it. But both Barrys get like, after trying to search through like the Batcave database, they realized that the aircraft that's supposed to carry Clark did not go to Kansas. It was intercepted and fell to not intercepted, but it was fell to Russia instead, which is kind of like a play on like Red Sun Superman Elseworld story, where it didn't go to Kansas in America and went to like a little village in Russia. But the Russians retrieved the aircraft and put the being inside this red solar powered cage. And you get a cool shot where, like, Batman, Michael Keaton Batman just doing his thing and kicking a lot of ass in ways that we never really had the technology back then to fully exploit. And man, it's so dope to see, like, Michael Keaton Batman. You just don't know, man. Because honestly, Michael Keaton next to Kevin Conroy is, like, in my opinion, those two primary definitive Batmans, in my opinion. These two laid the foundation where Bale and the others kind of like branched off from. So you get to see like a moment where, because like Barry B is like inexperienced and Barry A doesn't have who has the experience, don't have the powers no more. So you get to see Batman shine in this moment where he's taking out all these like military men in such a way that's so freaking dope. And like one guy tried to grab him behind and he takes a battering, whips it around and just comes right back and knocks him in the head, and he does like a kick to the, like, to the sternum to that guy. That was really, really dope. And there's one part when they're trying to make their escape, and I don't know if anybody really caught that, where he's like asking, like, the bears, like, one of the bears, like, how much do you weigh? And it'd be like, it's so dope if like Barry just made the Vicky Vale lines. Well, no, he gives like a weight, and then it's like a nice little callback if like Michael Keaton's like, you weigh more than 180. Something like whatever number he gave about how much he weighs, it's like, you weigh more than us. That was a nice little, because you get another callback where Barry B shows Barry A the Joker's laughing bag, and it's still laughing. After all these years, Jack Nicholson Joker is still laughing at him, and that is so, it's priceless, man. It's like he's like that is still, bravo to that. That was really dope. But anyway, they go into the chamber and they discover it's not Clark in there, it's his cousin Kara, and they brought her out. They fight their way out and go to the surface where the sun is out, so that way she can replenish her energy. And then there's a lot of slow mo here, but unlike Snyder stuff, this is like appropriate to show slow mo because you're doing hyper time at this point, and you have to see, like, Kara really, take it to these guys in a brutal fashion because she getting her powers all at once right now, while Clark, adapted and took, a while and learned how to fill into his powers over the years. So he knows when to, like, ease up on a bit of strength. So they go back to the Wayne Manor. And Kara, that's like, like I have no, I don't care about this planet. Even though they asked him for her help to stop Zod, Kara's like, like the moment I landed here, your people captured me and held me captive. It's like, why would I need to fight for your people? And even though, like, the bear's trying to explain to her, it's like, yeah, there's some crummy people here in the world, but most of us actually are pretty good, and we're fighting for it, kind of thing. It's only after Kara getting to witness Zod murder a bunch of military men where she's like, he comes back to, like, help and team up. And only after that, you get the scene where, like, like in the comics, Barry's trying to reclaim his powers, help with Batman's help, and like utilizing this kite thing to channel the lightning to channel through the chemicals and bathe him to give access to the Speed Force. And like I looked at that kite thing, and I felt like I remember in like Batman Year One, not Year One, Batman Earth One, where Batman in that universe, it's pretty much like the ultimate universe for DC Comics, hands Gordon a phone to contact him, and Gordon looks at it and he sees like there's like a bat logo on it, and it's like, my God, he put a bat on it. And it's like, that was my first reaction when I saw that kite, and it's like, my God, he put a bat on it. It's like, I was like, God, really? I was like, was that necessary? Was it necessary to make it a bat-shaped kite? Really? I was like, my God, the branding. I was like, you and the Jokers are obsessed with branding. Anyway, thanks to Supergirl, he managed to reclaim his powers. So they're going, these four are going to take the fight to Zod's forces. And Supergirl learns through Zod, which another bad CGI thing where it's like, Zod's, face covered in that little glass helmet thing, and it is not as terrible as like other CGI stuff, but I get people's point. But he explains to Kara that like he intercepted that baby's vessel, thinking like he had like the DNA to help terraform like any planet that they want to into a new Krypton. And in that process, he had to kill the baby, and which she was charged in looking after her cousin, because they were supposed to be the last two Kryptonians from that dying world, and she loses it, and she's just like ripping into Zod in a brutal fashion. And while Batman and the Flashes take care of the forces, but in the process, Batman, does a kamikaze to take down one of the ships, which doesn't work because it's super shielded. And Kara ends up, as he's trying to shut down Zod's ships and everything like that, she ends up getting stabbed and DNA harvested, and she dies. Then the Barrys decide, okay, we'll go back in time and we'll prevent those two things from happening. But each time, Barry B still gets injured by a Kryptonian, piece of metal or something like that, but that builds to something. But no matter what they do, the Batman and Kara still end up dying in some fashion. And then Barry A come to realize this is a canon event. There's nothing we can do. And he's trying to tell young Barry, but young Barry is like, he's in a battle, and it's like it's starting to affect him. It's like he's trying to save everybody, and because he's such a he's green to all this, he thinks he can just solve it by just going through time, and he keeps doing it, and Barry A keeps trying to stop him, and every time he comes back into the chronosphere thing, he gets injured more and more and more. There's nothing he can do about it. He still want to try. And Barry A is looking in the world of the chronosphere, where you see all these different universes, where you see like a universe with Adam West, and you see one with George Reeves 40s Superman with the 90s Flash guy, I forgot his name. He showed up in the TV show Flash, where he's running through time in that universe. Then you see Christopher Reeve's Superman with the I forgot the actress name who played Supergirl in that same kind of world. And these, you see that's where people's complaints with the CGI and stuff like that. You see them, which is supposed to be a big deal, and it is a big deal, but it's just like, I don't know, some people feel like it kind of undercuts the moment because that CGI kind of takes them out a little bit. But I give it like some bit of leeway because these two are not around no more, so it's like, when we can apply these things to people who had passed away, it's not as egregious. But then again, it's 2023. You have the technology to make these people look good. But that's the whole constant editing and all this other stuff that's been going on with this film, where they had to probably, I don't want to say half-ass, but it's like something had to take a backseat, and unfortunately it's the CGI on this stuff. And I figure like studio heads feel like, look, it's good enough, we've got to send this out, so send it out. Which is a shame, because you shouldn't send out like half-ass products. But then you get a cool little shot of Nicolas Cage Superman fighting some kind of giant spider thing in his universe, where it kind of is a callback a long time ago after Batman '89, where Kevin Smith wanted to make his own Superman movie starring Nicolas Cage fighting like a giant spider, and like collab with somebody else who I think he was responsible for the Wild Wild West movie with a giant mechanical spider situation. A movie like that never came to be, but they added that in, which I thought was a cool touch, and like blew a lot of people's mind. Like, oh my god, that was so dope. But it's like, why you need a CGI that? Nicolas Cage is still alive. You could have included him, like an actual Nicolas Cage, in this to play a Superman, which I'm pretty sure, like, I think where it got around that, Nicolas Cage kind of, really like lost it, like how like he was so happy to see see that, I imagine that he was like ecstatic. I think he named one of his kids after Superman. The same thing with like Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld named one of his children after Clark. 1 second here. Brother texted me. Okay. So you get a cool spots with that, but that's not the biggest thing I saw in this movie. We'll get to that. But while Barry's witnessing all these worlds that look like they're about to collide, two of them do, then here comes like the shadowy figure that kicked Barry out of the Speed Force earlier in the movie. Then come to realize it was like Barry B in like a paradox future kind of like timeline, because he kept constantly going back in time trying to fix everything and not accepting the fact that he can't fix it. And in a way, because thanks to one of the few things where the CW superhero shows, DC shows did so well is like bringing in certain characters that I wasn't even familiar with, like Savitar, which was a dark evil Barry Allen of like a different timeline. It's like a Barry Allen variant. That showed up in like season 2 or 3. And I was like, oh, that's Savitar. Oh, okay, that's pretty dope. It's like, you got to deal with Savitar. Even though it should have been like Reverse Flash, or at least hint at Reverse Flash. I know I keep harping on that, but we know the story. But it's pretty dope. You introduce like, because not many people like figure it out. At least I'm pretty sure there's a couple, but that is pretty much Savitar. You talk about Dark Berry Island, that's Savitar. So Savitar just comes to the realization, okay, I'll just take you out, so that way we can, because like I think you're the Nexus event, or at least the canon event that's keeping it turning out so lousy. So I just gotta get rid of you. But when Barry B realizes what's going on and everything like that, he takes the hit, which not only because he's dead, he erases Dark Barry, because that was from him. So Barry kind of realized that not only this alternate timeline is doomed to fail, and Zod wins at this timeline, so he has to correct his mistake. He comes to learn, finally hear what his mother was trying to tell him all those years ago, that sometimes things don't have an answer. It's not, everything doesn't have a solution. So he goes back in time, which I kind of like this part because it kind of speaks to, like, when you're dealing with timeline, sometimes it can turn out crap if you're not writing it correctly. I don't want to say writing it correctly, not everybody knows how timeline actually works, but if it's played as stupid or hacky, not anybody will gravitate towards it. So he goes back in time in his street clothes, incognito. He sees himself, putting the can of tomatoes into her cart, and he just lets him pass by him and back to continue what he's going to continue to do. So because got to continue the paradox, where it needs to go. Don't mess, because he's about to like try to correct it, but it's still going to be iffy. But he's going to try to put things back in order. So he lets himself pass by and goes back, and he has a brief talk with his mom, and it's like, I like the actress who plays mom, who, and like no so subtle hints that at least the way I'm reading it, and a few people are reading it, where she kind of feels like she knows this is her older son, but she's not like getting, it's like for some reason I won't say for some reason, you like to say like, well, I like somehow you're here, but let's not delve too far into it. You're probably here for a reason. But she just they just have a moment where it's like, it's like he plays like he's like somebody else. It's like, I'm here to visit my mom, and she's a great person I know. And she has moments like, I know we just met, but you seem like you kind of need a hug. May I? And he gives him like a hug, and then he goes into his super speed, and then he moves around her, takes the can of tomatoes, he places on a shelf, and he goes back in place, and then he says his goodbyes, and he leaves, and he ends up going back to his present timeline, which seemingly seems all appropriate now. And then he goes to the courtroom, and his father exonerated after the staticky footage of the shop, the store's camera footage, and you see like Barry's father's face look up as he's getting a can of tomatoes. Clearly, Barry did change at least something, where it's like, okay, you'll see like an effect of it in a minute, but it's like, okay, because his father didn't look up for the camera, because the can was on like the middle shelf, so he doesn't have no reason to actually look up at any time. So he just places it back on the shelf, but it's on top shelf, so he has a reason to look up, which exonerates his father. So as he's leaving out the courthouse, you get a call from Bruce Wayne. He's about to pull up, and then out walks George Clooney, Batman, and I'm like, what? And there's a guy who was sitting next to me with him, and I'm assuming his other little brothers or something like that. And like, cause the youngest one was like asking certain questions about Flash and everything like that, and the dude sitting next to me was like hyped as hell. I was like, oh my god, he was like the most hyped. You know, because a lot of people are hyped in my theater, but he was like the most hyped, and like I didn't want to like harsh his vibe anyway, because it's like, yeah, this is a pretty dope moment, and it's like, oh my god, and it's like, this could just be like a one-off thing, but I don't know, because like, I don't know what this is supposed to mean moving forward, because it's like, because it could easily be led to believe that, you know, moving forward, James Gunn, because we got Elseworlds Batman with Robert Pattinson, but James Gunn gonna have his cinematic universe timeline Batman, and is George Clooney coming back for that? Because George Clooney still looks good for his age and everything like that, but it's like, if you continue on with a new Batman, you want somebody younger, you know, not as known kind of situation, to continue on with your Batman Brave and the Bold kind of stuff for the DC cinematic universe moving forward. But you're bringing back a previous Batman in this, so what that's supposed to mean? So, God. And of course you got a post-credit scene with, you know, Aquaman and Barry Allen. He's trying to tell him the story about what had happened, but it's like, it didn't go nowhere. It's just like, oh, Jason Momoa, of course, yeah. But anyway, that was a dope movie. 8.5 out of 10 in my opinion, and you already know my cons as I addressed it throughout this video. But man, I was like, what is that supposed to mean? Because it could be like a one-off thing, it's like a joke or an Easter egg or something, but it's like, to establish like a brand new Batman, and it's supposed to be like a Batman that's supposed to be kind of like legitimized for the future, because Ben Affleck doesn't want to do this no more, and for future Batman properties for the cinematic universe. I wouldn't say it can't be George Clooney, but it's like, you don't bring in George Clooney because you know how people are gonna say or start speculating. And you just, obviously you just want to like buzz around this movie as much as possible, but that's just so cheap, in my opinion. Even though like it'd be kind of dope to have George Clooney, you know, fix. Even though Michael Keaton's Batman is like, you know, that universe is still the same as Val Kilmer and George Clooney stuff. They just recast it. It's still the same universe, but it's just like, I didn't expect Michael Keaton to stay on as Batman, but George Clooney is like as dope as it would be for him to be Batman again, and with proper story writing and material and everything like that, for him to work off of. I doubt it that he will be here for like a good let's say 10-year stint as Batman, whatever projects he guest cameos in. I don't know. Sure, he's a more happier Batman, I imagine, but I don't know. And hey Apex, how you doing, man? But this is like the second movie that I can remember that I was actually surprised, that had something that legitimately surprised me. The first one was John Krasinski, Reed Richards, and Doctor Strange 2, because a lot of people wanted him for Reed Richards, which I was kind of like, the guy from The Office? Why? I never watched The Office like that, so like I never understood people's like fervor to have him casted as Reed Richards until I saw him act in the role in Doctor Strange 2. It's like, okay, I can see it. Yeah, that's definitely Reed Richards. I can definitely see it. So it's like, I was legit surprised, like, oh my god, they actually listened to the fans and they casted the dude? Like, oh, of course that was supposed to be like a different multiverse, but it's just like, I don't know, I actually can see John Krasinski as like the main Reed Richards for the MCU. But that legit surprised me, because I did not think they'll actually listen to the fans and actually cast a dude. They didn't have to do that. But this is the second time I actually was caught by legit surprise in a film where it's like, oh my god, and it was so tight-lipped about it. I was like, wow, they like out of a million years, who would have like thought they would, you know, because yeah, they supposed to recast Batman, but you would think it was like a new actor in the role, but they just go back to a well, because this has been like a good handful of years of actors getting like a second bite of the apple of characters that they used to play that did not turn out well because of poor writing, or the studio didn't have faith in the project or something, and they coming back and they showing what they're made of, like, you know, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and then like you got Hayden Christensen with like Anakin Skywalker. It's like it's a fair amount of people like getting like a second bite of the apple and showing their stuff, and it's like, yeah, these guys can act. You just didn't think so because the poor material they had to work with at that time. So, man, I mean, like, I'm all here for George Clooney being Batman moving forward for the James Gunn's DC universe stuff. I have no problem with that because he is a great actor, but I don't know. I'm not sure how many people are behind it. It could easily just been like a one-off, but like, why would you waste people's like, you know, expectations or get their hopes up on something that you probably just wasted as like some kind of glorified cameo, where it's supposed to be this kind of thing that needs to be played seriously. Because if you're going to have like a new, different Batman moving forward, it has to be something legit, and not wasting on George Clooney for like a glorified buzz conversation for a week and a half. So that's my thoughts on The Flash. Like I said, 8.5 out of 10 in my opinion. It's pretty dope. The CGI, on some cases, it was terrible. I'm not even gonna hold you. And then like, not even hint at Reverse Flash, which we all know from the story that he was the one who killed Barry's mom, and he didn't even leave any kind of clues to that could lead into a sequel to a new Flash movie where he has to deal with the Reverse Flash because he's pretty much like his Joker or Lex Luthor. Anyway, let me know in the comments below, if you're watching this on YouTube, what you think of the Flash movie, what you rate it, what was your highlights, what's the favorite thing, worst thing, which I'm assuming is going to be the CGI. I'm not even going to front. But anyway, I will see you guys tomorrow for just one little string where I go over a spoiler review of season 1 of X-Men Evolution, and I might give myself typically I give myself a break on Sundays. Well, I could just wait till Monday to do a spoiler review on X-Men Evolution season 1 and give myself a break Sunday like I typically would, and come back Monday for the review. So I think that's what I'm going to do. But I'll see you all in a couple of days. Have a great weekend. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. Happy Juneteenth for all my brothers and sisters out there. And I'll see you all soon. Take care. Have a great night.